The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
The Republican Party has completed its fall into totally disjointed apoplexy in terms of what's going on with the Republican primary. Former Speaker of the House John Boehner has now endorsed Paul Ryan to be the Republican nominee for president if the party fails to choose a candidate on the first ballot at the Republican National Convention in Cleveland this summer, saying if we don't have a nominee who can win on the first ballot, I'm for none of the above. They all had a chance to win. None of them won. So I'm for none of the above. I'm for Paul Ryan to be our nominee. Now, this might be interesting to you because Paul Ryan is not running for president and he claims that he doesn't want to. Boehner saying anybody can be nominated at the convention in Cleveland this summer. This is true. There is this thing called Rule 40, and some people are starting to talk about Rule 40. Rule 40 was a rule change that happened at the 2012 Republican convention in Tampa, which said that in order to be an eligible candidate for the Republican presidential nomination at the convention, a candidate has to win a plurality of the vote in at least 8 states in the 2016 primary. Now, obviously, Paul Ryan is not going to have won a plurality. It's a difficult word for me to say. I don't know why. In the 2016 primary in any states because he's not on the ballot. But Republican insiders and political experts I've been talking to, Lewis, say if the Republican Party wants to put someone in who hasn't won any primaries, they have a number of opportunities before the convention to change Rule 40. Don't be confused. Rule 40 is not going to prevent the Republican establishment from doing whatever they want to do.
This is really a testament to just how rigged the system is.
Yeah.
And the Democratic Party is really no different when it comes to this type of thing.
If the establishment wants to pull someone in like Paul Ryan or Mitt Romney, who seems to always be there in the background now, or whoever is part of their Stop Trump strategy, they'll just change the rule at one of these meetings. And of course, Donald Trump has said there will be riots if this happens. A Donald Trump surrogate has now said riots aren't always a bad thing. Riots can be good. In any case, Paul Ryan and his staff are saying he doesn't want the nomination. But what does that really mean, right? I mean, would he refuse it? And if you've been watching the current season of House of Cards, this might ring a bell. I don't want to give anything away. I won't say anything more, but it sounds like they're literally reading from the House of Cards script when Paul Ryan says, oh, no, I'm not running and I don't want the nomination.
Yes, I did draw those parallels, and it's really that's why so many people like House of Cards. I think it's just so well written, and they look at it and they see what is happening in their own backyard. And
I, at this point, am convinced that even if Donald Trump, forget about if Donald Trump is the nominee, even if Donald Trump becomes president, the Republican Party loses because the Republican Party has been utterly destroyed through this process. You have the lifelong moderate Democrat from New York who was for basically his entire life in favor of even partial birth abortion, not in favor of banning partial birth abortion, has a foreign policy strategy that when you can even understand it, when it's even remotely coherent, it has many parallels to that of Bernie Sanders, considered the most liberal candidate in either primary currently. And he has done it by appealing to voters who we've always said the Republican Party has appealed to voters who stand to actually be worse off under their policies. It's appealing to the lowest of the low information voters who will never benefit from so many of the mechanisms that rich people like Donald Trump benefit from. The Republican Party, even if Trump wins the White House, is destroyed by that. And I don't know whether they are starting to realize that. It certainly seems like to some extent they are.
Well, we said that the Republican Party really needed to change the way they do things.
Yeah.
This wasn't really what we had in mind.
No, not at all. So we will see what ultimately happens with that. We'll see what happens in the primaries. But Paul Ryan's name now increasingly being discussed, as is Mitt Romney. And I know Mitt Romney is not running and he just seems to be there. But I would not put it past Republicans and the establishment to do something that Donald Trump is not going to like sometime in the next few months. I spent a lot of yesterday and today reading reaction and analysis to President Obama's Supreme Court nomination of Merrick Garland to replace the late Antonin Scalia. And I told you yesterday that in many ways, Merrick Garland is not really a liberal dream candidate. He's very corporate friendly. He is a Republican-appointed prosecutor in past administrations. There's no doubt about this whatsoever. Now, one way to look at it is, well, it might be a way for President Obama to get somebody in by appealing to conservatives. But I've been increasingly swayed by a number of opinion pieces I've read that there is no chance whatsoever that Merrick Garland is going to be a Supreme Court justice, and that this entire thing could be a very interesting setup from President Obama, setting up Republicans to totally self-destruct when they block the nomination of Merrick Garland on principle, as many said they would. Jim Newell wrote a really good piece in Slate where he is arguing that Merrick Garland is not going to become a Supreme Court justice prior to the November election, that it is unlikely Merrick Garland will ever become a Supreme Court justice, and that both Merrick Garland and President Obama are pretty well aware of this. And Newell goes on to say, if President Obama really thought he would get someone on the court, it would be ridiculous to have selected a 3-year-old center-right judge. It would have been logical to pick a younger justice who would be have more of a runway to serve on the Supreme Court, a more liberal justice, and Andrew Napolitano, Fox News' senior judicial analyst, and far be it from me to go to Andrew Napolitano for a sort of logical critique, but there's a very reason why we're doing this. He also described President Obama's Supreme Court nominee as a conservative and said even if he were appointed, confirmed, it would be no great victory for President Obama. Take a look.
Is not a win for the president. Judge Garland is the most conservative nominee to the Supreme Court by a Democratic president in the modern era, and is put there, in my view, as a nominee to frustrate the process. If he gets on the court, he is not Justice Elena Kagan. He is not Justice Sonia Sotomayor. He does not think about the law the way Barack Obama does. So Barack Obama does not get the opportunity to appoint Antonin Scalia's opposite number.
So we've already seen, as I mentioned yesterday and earlier today, there's a great piece from our friends at Ring of Fire about Merrick Garland being a pro-corporate lawyer and judge. The National Organization for Women has released one of the first statements following his nomination, saying that there is really no clue whatsoever whether Garland is even a supporter of women's rights. This entire strategy that President Obama is employing does depend on a Democrat winning in November to really succeed, right? If President Obama had nominated someone equivalent to Elena Kagan or Sonia Sotomayor now, Republicans go nuts. They say this is a liberal extremist. They have a much better PR reaction when they block the nominee. By setting up Merrick Garland to not be confirmed, right? Let's be clear. President Obama is setting up Republicans to damage their own standing with Republican voters. And it could be a brilliant technique, Lewis, but a Democrat does need to win in November, and then they get to appoint a truly liberal justice, and the Republicans look even dumber because they could have accepted Merrick Garland, the center-right guy, but they chose not to for political reasons.
Yeah, but how much is this really going to damage the Republicans in office, Dave?
We don't know.
We're giving the Republican voters here more credit than they deserve when it comes to actively paying attention to what's happening.
I'm not
and
so
then
sure.
remembering the things that happen.
Speaking of remembering, remember what happened with the government shutdown. The idea of a government shutdown from Republicans was, this is going to be terrible for President Obama. This is going to be fantastic for us. And every single poll showed voters, including Republican voters, by and large, understood it was a Republican government shutdown which accomplished nothing. We have not seen Republicans come even close to another government shutdown since, because it was a disaster and it backfired. And this has the potential. I mean, think about it. Orrin Hatch said if President Obama wanted to do the right thing, he would nominate someone like Merrick Garland, but he's not going to do that. He's going to play partisan politics. President Obama nominated Merrick Garland, and now even Orrin Hatch is saying this is not going to go anywhere. 8 Republican senators have said they would meet with Merrick Garland. These are mostly symbolic meetings. They're not going to go anywhere. This could be political genius. Of course, if a Democrat does not win in November, it's basically all pointless, isn't it?
Well, then they can't go back and renominate Garland, right? I mean, they would look even more foolish if they did that.
Oh, Merrick Garland's career, maybe he is being sacrificed here in many ways. And I don't know whether he knows it. I don't know how upfront everybody was about this. There is a real chance that this is going to put an effective end to Merrick Garland's judicial career here, because this has significant risks. Every indication is this nomination is going nowhere, and we're going to continue following it. Hey, I have awesome video. This is my favorite video clip right now. You remember the movie Wall Street, Lewis, of course, with who remind me who was in it?
Fox?
Yes, right. And Asher Edelman is an investor who was one of the inspirations for the character Gordon Gekko, a corporate raider, a vulture capitalist in the movie Wall Street. Asher Edelman showed up on CNBC over the last week, and he came out and he said, hey, you know what? We're in a recession right now for everybody but those who are very, very rich. We're effectively in a recession. I'm going to play the first part for you. This is absolutely fantastic. Check out the reaction from the panel there when they ask, well, according to who are we in a recession?
To have you on the program.
Thank you very much. Nice to be here.
You say that we are currently in a recession. Every Fed official who speaks to us tells us we are not in a recession. What are they missing?
I think it's pretty straightforward. The average American has not had an increase in pay in 15 years, but things have cost more in the marketplaces. He has been in a recession for 15 years. Nothing's changed for him. Up at the top, we're not in a recession, but 80% of the Americans have been in a recession for at least 15 years.
So how does that translate into investing into the stock market? Is it that it's a recession that seems like nobody realizes we are in one, and certainly nobody realizes we've been in one for 15 years?
Who is your nobody?
I think the broader investing public. If you polled anybody on the street or anybody on this desk here.
It sounds like you're talking more about financial oppression than you are in economic decline. I mean, I get the fact that a lot of people aren't doing as well because structurally society isn't rewarding them maybe where they should. I'm not going to get into that.
That's a social issue. I'm talking about money and economics. People can buy less for what they have now than they could 15 years ago. In their lives, that's a recession.
I love it, Lewis. And they just seem so confused. Like, who's noticing this recession you claim exists? I mean, nobody's noticing it. Well, what do you mean by nobody? I mean, none of the really well-paid anchors at CNBC who basically just tout supply-side economics. Yeah. None of us have noticed a recession.
Or anyone walking around with suits in the financial district down below here.
If you go out and talk to the traders at the stock exchange, they're not noticing the recession. I mean, who else is there really? This is absolutely fantastic. And this is where it really gets really, really good. Then they go into the presidential race. And who does the vulture capitalist on who Gordon Gekko is based support, based on who would be best for the average person? Take a look.
Let's move on to the presidential elections. I'm curious, we're asking everybody essentially who you think the best candidate for the economy would be.
Bernie Sanders.
Without a doubt. Why is that?
No question.
Policies?
Well, I think it's quite simple again. If you look at something called velocity of money, you guys know what that is, I presume. That means how much gets spent and turns around. When you have the top 1% getting money, they spend 5–10% of what they earn. When you have the lower end of the economy getting money, they spend 100 or 110% of what they earn. As you've had a transfer of wealth to the top and a transfer of income to the top, you have a shrinking consumer base, basically, and you have a shrinking velocity of money. Mm-hmm. Bernie is the only person out there who I think is talking at all about both fiscal stimulation and banking rules that will get the banks to begin to generate lending again as opposed to speculation.
I love it. And velocity of money, of course, it's related to marginal propensity to consume. The lower you are in terms of the sort of wealth spectrum, the more likely you are to buy stuff with any additional money you get. It's related to the economic multiplier. This is why food stamps are so stimulative. We've been talking about this basic principle for years and years. Every supply sider I interview is perplexed by it. I don't know that Asher Edelman got through to anybody, but just watching the shock on the faces of these CNBC anchors was really something.
It is, and I posted this video to Facebook, and I just wanted to share it because it is kind of shocking, even for us, to hear someone who comes from a position like his to say this. But if you agree with us on economics, it makes perfect sense.
Asher Edelman, quite a guy, and look up his history. I mean, really a guy with an interesting background. And I know this is crazy, but he's not actually that rich in the grand scheme of things. His net worth is about $25 million, according to our research, which is, of course, orders of magnitude more than the average net worth in the United States. But compared to some of the uber rich, he is relatively low on the rich guy scale, which is also sort of an interesting thing. I'm on Twitter at dpacman. Lewis is on Twitter at Lewis Motamedi. We'll take a quick break.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
The David Pakman Show exists because of the support of our audience. If you enjoy the show, if you listen to the podcast or watch the YouTube clips or watch us on Free Speech TV or listen on the radio, know that your support is what has allowed us to grow from once every other week to a daily program. Today's new member of the day is Michael Bell. You can join Michael, get your membership at 1/3 discount, plus get a free David Pakman Show t-shirt, plus be entered in our wireless Bluetooth headphone giveaway. We'll be giving away 5 pairs of Elite XT headphones worth $80 per pair on March 28th. You have to go to the right website, though, and that website is davidpakman.com/spring16. Lewis, the t-shirts are flying out of here. Lewis almost got hit. The UPS guy came in. It was such a big stack of t-shirts he was taking out. Lewis was almost smothered by it. It was crazy.
It was a potentially life-threatening situation.
Yeah, and that's a joke. I mean, obviously, the t-shirts, we're not really producing the t-shirts here, but figuratively, they're flying out of here, at least to the extent that I'm placing orders online for people.
Should I not tell people about your sweatshop in the basement?
We really don't want to mention that. Yeah, no, but and no sweatshops, by the way. The t-shirts are sustainably made and printed in the United States, and it's a whole fantastic thing. All right, I have a film recommendation for you today. This is really one of the better documentaries I've seen recently in terms of just how compelling it is. The name is Best of Enemies. It's from last year. It's a documentary about the 1968 TV debates between Gore Vidal and William F. Buckley. William F. Buckley, one of the most interesting conservative debaters that I've ever had the chance to really observe in detail. Gore Vidal, one of the most compelling progressive thinkers that I've also had the opportunity to study and whose material I've looked at. And these debates, the stark contrast that you realize exists from political debate between Vidal and Buckley in the 60s and what happens now, even like, for example, during a Republican debate, the contrast could not be more stark, Lewis, and the documentary is fascinating.
You are not the first person to recommend this to me.
Yep.
It is on my Netflix list, which contains now over 100 different shows, documentaries.
Is that right?
It's getting big. So
somehow mine is only like 25 items.
Well, I don't know how that happens. I
Yeah.
guess I'm just more interested in a number of things you might not be so interested in.
The individuals are fascinating. The documentary is fascinating. It includes interviews with people who were close to both Gore Vidal and William F. Buckley. Check this out. davidpakman.com/recommendations for a list of all of my recommendations. And of course, you can check this out on Netflix and on Amazon and probably a bunch of other places. The documentary is Best of Enemies. All right. Earlier this week, we had our latest edition of Morality with Motamedi, where we ask Lewis moral and ethical questions. He has to figure out what the path forward is. The setup was, if you were forced to choose a world leader to assassinate, what would be the moral way to decide who it should be? And Lewis, to paraphrase, your answer was, figure out who is doing the most harm or causing the most suffering. Is that a way to generally summarize?
And by eliminating that person, you would have to weigh who takes over and if the country has a shot at recovering without that leader. And so everyone who is watching can see the picture. My choice was Kim Jong-un.
All right. So Lewis saying he would go after the North Korean leader, Kim Jong-un. We got a bunch of responses. I want to go through a few of these with you. One comment, most people would have also agreed that Gaddafi deserves to be killed. Now, after his death, the country has been in a civil war ever since. You have to have some idea what to do after a dictator is gone. Otherwise, all the people will suffer. A very pragmatic sort of choice, but clearly pragmatism connected to the morals and ethics of it. Because if it's not pragmatic to say, we get rid of this person, it's going to be replaced, there's going to be a replacement with someone better, you're not necessarily making the most moral or ethical choice. Another comment that we received. I generally agree with Lewis's reasoning, and I too would choose Kim Jong-un as the knee-jerk response. I would want to make sure that surrounding nations were able to capitalize on the moment, however, and help resolve the ensuing instability, because you can bet that if he was assassinated, the North Korean people would pay a price if the current regime retained power. Another comment we received. Why this obsession with death? I mean, seriously, isn't it much more suffering when somebody hungers for his whole life instead of somebody being shot and dying within a few minutes? This really got the whole point. I mean, well, this really got at what we were saying, which was, okay, if you can save 1,000 people from death or 100,000 people from a life of hunger by eliminating a dictator, how do we weigh that? That's really what that comment is getting at.
And so, well, what you have in North Korea is both. I mean, both are happening. You have people being sent to camps. People are being executed and killed. Their entire families sometimes are being killed. People imprisoned for life. And then you have the general population, which, except for the elite in Pyongyang, the capital, seem to all be starving.
A few more comments we received. The next one, obviously, assassinate Erdogan of Turkey. He's the most dangerous man in the world currently and has very little proper backup as a replacement. Yeah, a number of comments that was saying Erdogan is the one where getting rid of him could actually create the most change in the region.
I don't know. I wouldn't call him the most dangerous man in the world, though. I think that's a stretch.
And next comment, a situation like this really does bring in the question, what is the weight of one life compared to thousands, or one life to save millions? However, the leader I decide to kill must be one of the nastiest ones in world history who has had a direct involvement in the deaths of millions. If we knew for sure what Adolf Hitler would become, I would have no qualms about killing him either as a baby or as a young adult. Yeah, we were talking about right now. So while it makes a very good point about weighing the death of some versus the suffering of others, it sort of misses that this was a pragmatic question of the people alive now, who would you take out?
That's true. Well, I mean, by most estimates, the Sudanese government has killed millions, right? And so, but if you take out whoever the president or leader is there, no, I don't think anything is going to change, right?
This is definitely one of the ones where the practicality of what happens after you kill them, as well as how to weigh death versus other types of suffering, was inextricably linked to the morality and ethics of the question. Send in your suggestions for future Morality with Motamedi questions. Thanks to everybody who wrote in, and we will have another one in about a week and a half.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Walmart is the world's largest retailer with over 4,000 stores in the United States and over 11,000 worldwide. Walmart is often criticized for their business practices, and we've talked on the program before about how Walmart sort of creates their own customers by making it difficult for its own employees to shop anywhere else and making it particularly easy for them to shop at Walmart. And we received an email from a former Walmart employee, and they shared insights on this issue from their personal experience working at Walmart. Our research into many of the topics discussed in the email turned up quite a bit of interesting evidence that suggests Walmart is not only creating customers from among their employees, they're also hugely benefiting from social welfare programs that their employees are entitled to by virtue of being underpaid. Let's start with one of the very obvious ways that Walmart creates customers from their employees. If you've ever been in a Walmart, you've no doubt seen that standard outfit that Walmart employees wear, the de facto uniform, blue or white shirts and khaki pants. One might reasonably assume that these outfits are distributed to employees for free, but Walmart employees, or associates as they're referred to within the company, are required to buy their own uniforms at Walmart. How much does Walmart make from selling these uniforms? The former employee who wrote us estimates, at last count, Walmart employs 2.2 million people worldwide. Let's say the average investment is skewed to the lower end, say $75, a very conservative and fair assumption. At $75 per employee, Walmart makes $165 million. from the requiring of the purchase of these uniforms. While we don't have the numbers on how much Walmart employees pay for their uniforms internationally, Making Change at Walmart, which is an organization focused on improving conditions at Walmart, calculated that the company stands to make between $51 and $78 million in uniform sales to its employees in the U.S. alone. There are laws in place that prevent companies from forcing their employees to pay out of pocket for uniforms if the cost of said uniforms would drop the wages of those employees below the federal minimum of $7.25 an hour. The lowest wage that Walmart pays is $10 an hour. If we assume that each employee spends $75 on uniforms every 6 months or so, that wage is reduced to $9.91. Legally, this isn't problematic for Walmart, and it's still above the federal minimum wage. But as we know, it's nowhere near a living wage, and these are clothes that Walmart could provide to their employees for free at a tiny, tiny cost to them. But they choose not to. In fact, Walmart's owners, the Waltons, could buy 3 uniforms for every American employee with around only a week of their dividends from Walmart stock. Requiring low-wage employees to purchase uniforms is an unnecessarily tight-fisted move from a company that made more than $16 billion in profits in 2015. But the policy is particularly harmful to new employees as they have to purchase their uniforms before they even start working, and hence before they even receive their first paycheck. Now, Walmart claims that their average wage is $13.38 an hour. This doesn't account, though, for part-time employees. And additionally, the average supplied by Walmart includes store manager salaries, which artificially inflates the average significantly. For comparison, the lowest wage at a Costco store for employees is $11.50 an hour, with the average being $21 an hour. Walmart ran a TV ad last year talking about wage increases.
There are no medals won for earning a living. It's just what you do for family. But it's hard to build a future if you can't see past today. That's why Walmart is investing in the most important part of our company, our people. Because a raise in pay raises us all.
The ad contains some questionable claims regarding so-called living wages, and the Better Business Bureau actually notified the FTC that Walmart may have violated advertising regulations. However, officials at the FTC declined to investigate whether Walmart's claims constituted false advertising. Although Walmart has increased wages, they're offsetting this cost by cutting employee hours and even closing some locations. Hardly a net win for Walmart workers. And as we mentioned, $10 an hour is not a living wage, and many workers will struggle to get by. Let's discuss Walmart employees and food stamps. As a result of the low wages that they earn, many Walmart employees in the U.S. are on government assistance programs like food stamps. Interestingly enough, Walmart's employee discount doesn't apply to grocery items other than produce. Americans for Tax Fairness, which is a nonprofit focused on tax reform, estimates that American taxpayers pay $6.2 billion with a B dollars per year to subsidizing Walmart's low wages in the form of government assistance programs. Walmart even acknowledges that they make a significant amount of money from food stamps in a financial report discussing potential negative impacts to revenue. Quote, "Our business operations are subject to numerous risks, factors, and uncertainties domestically and internationally, which are outside our control. These factors include changes in the amount of payments made under the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Plan and other public assistance plans, changes in the eligibility requirements of public assistance plans." This basically is Walmart admitting that their bottom line is impacted when fewer people are using food stamps. This makes Walmart's low wages potentially even more sinister because they're in a position to ensure that their own employees need to use food stamps to get by. And where do those food stamps get spent? At Walmart, where those same employees can buy everything except food at a slight discount. Walmart employees have also run food drives for fellow employees because many employees at their stores can't afford enough food. While it could certainly be argued that it's a good thing that some employees are looking out for each other, it's not their responsibility to provide food for their colleagues. Rather, it's Walmart's responsibility to pay a living wage. Raising wages at Walmart is easier said than done, however, particularly if you're thinking of organizing a union. Although legally, U.S. companies are not allowed to fire employees for trying to organize a union, Walmart has all but perfected suppressing unions. The employee that wrote into us talked about Walmart's anti-union culture, saying it was legend around Walmart that even a whisper of unionization would result in immediate termination. We were expressly forbidden from distributing any paper, pamphlets, notes of any kind for any reason. There was an ongoing story among employees that attempted unionization of all the Walmart butchers and meat workers resulted in the closure of all fresh meat preparation at Walmart. We looked into this, and it turns out that indeed in 2000, meat workers at a Texas Walmart did in fact vote to unionize. Almost immediately afterwards, Walmart switched to buying prepackaged meat, stopped cutting meat in stores, and they insisted that the switch had nothing whatsoever to do with the vote to unionize, but the timing is suspect, to say the least. A leaked Walmart training showcases some of this insane anti-union rhetoric that Walmart uses to discourage workers from unionizing.
Now, I think you know by now that our company prefers to have open and direct communication with our associates. We don't think that a labor union is necessary here.
Here at Walmart, our associates are used to having a voice in their workplace. Our company has always supported an open door policy, and we're used to having our voice heard for free.
And where does Walmart stand on all of this? Our philosophy is simple. We are pro-associate.
It's an absurd statement on Walmart's part to say that it's pro-associate when it takes stances that actively make things worse for its employees. An internal document distributed to store managers was also leaked entitled, quote, "A Manager's Toolbox for Remaining Union-Free." Managers are instructed to gather detailed information on employee activities if they suspect that employees are organizing a union. For example, managers are supposed to figure out who attended union meetings and what was said at those meetings. Quote, "How did we learn associates were attending union meetings? Who told management about the meetings? What did they say? What was management's response? Do we know who attended the meeting? Do we know how many associates attended the meeting? What has been the associates' behavior since the meetings?" That is from page 35 of this document. But managers are expressly prohibited from doing just that only a few pages later. From page 41, you cannot spy on any union activities the associates may be involved in, such as attending union meetings, nor can you have another person do this for you. Last year, Walmart temporarily closed 5 stores due to what it referred to as plumbing problems. However, workers at one of these stores located in Pico Rivera, California, alleged that the store was actually shut down as retaliation for them demanding better pay and better working conditions. Walmart has also conducted mass surveillance of its employees, particularly those suspected of wanting to organize. The retailer went so far as to hire Lockheed Martin, the defense contractor, to spy on its employees. Walmart has created a totally Orwellian system of anti-union propaganda and surveillance in order to prevent employees from organizing, and it has proven to be very, very effective from the company's perspective. Defense contractors aren't the only companies that partner with Walmart, however. The retailer has partnered with numerous financial industries in a sort of attempt to carve out a niche in the financial service industry. Walmart has tried to acquire a banking charter in the past, but the FDIC denied their request. Since they couldn't get a charter of their own, Walmart then partnered with Green Dot Bank. In fact, Walmart bought a 4% stake in Green Dot. That may not seem like much, but it's actually just below an important regulatory threshold beyond which Walmart would have been subject to far greater scrutiny by the SEC for their investment stake. Through Green Dot, Walmart offers various financial services, including prepaid gift cards and credit cards, and Green Dot advertises both its Walmart and non-Walmart cards as not requiring credit checks and having no overdraft fees.
Millions of Americans break free with Green Dot cards. No overdraft fees or credit card debt. It's the no-hassle way to handle your money. Get yours now at greendot.com and at major retailers nationwide.
Break free!
The problem with these cards is that they have numerous hidden fees, including fees for balance inquiries on out-of-network ATMs. These hidden fees can very quickly add up, especially since the people targeted by these cards are overwhelmingly low-income Americans without bank accounts. Now, the ATM network in question is the MoneyPass network, which is a separate company, not directly affiliated with Walmart, but partnered with Green Dot, since Green Dot doesn't have any physical branch locations. Walmart also attempted to start paying its employees through these prepaid gift cards, but the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau fortunately stopped them from doing so, as employers are required by law to give workers the option of a normal paycheck, actual money they can spend anywhere in any form that they want. Now, if all of these financial connections weren't confusing enough, Walmart also partners with Woodforest Bank, which operates branches in Walmart stores in certain states. Woodforest Bank has also had issues with fees as they were involved in a class action lawsuit regarding excessive overdraft fees in 2010. So we have Walmart providing financial services through partnerships with various companies in a system far more complicated than what would be expected from a retailer. And on top of that, it's difficult to determine just how much money Walmart makes from offering these services. In their public SEC filings, Walmart groups all of its revenues from financial services under other, making it virtually impossible to know exactly how much those services are bringing in. While Walmart isn't operating a closed economy by definition, they are effectively operating something very close to one. Walmart is often held up as a sort of shining example of how effective supply-side economics are. In reality, Walmart is heavily subsidized by the government through benefits that its workers receive as a result of being paid so poorly. Walmart is also built on the commons. Their inventory is delivered to stores on public roads, and those stores are provided with water and electricity from public utilities. They operate within the legal and judicial system, which is, of course, operated by the federal government. Walmart also creates an internal environment that generates business from its own employees, both overtly, in the case of the uniforms workers are required to buy, and implicitly, as we've seen with the establishment of banking options and attempts to replace paychecks with gift cards. Now, when Walmart employees do realize that their employment may not be organized in the way that's best for them, they face extremely harsh opposition to any sort of effort to organize unions. Walmart has, in essence, built a system reminiscent of the coal mine company store, where miners had no choice but to buy food and clothing from the store operated by their own company.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Bingham County, Idaho Sheriff Craig Rowland told TV station KIDK that the legislature shouldn't have gotten involved in creating a statewide system for collecting and tracking rape kits because, as he claims, most rape accusations are false. He said, quote, "The majority of our rapes, not to say that we don't have rapes, we do, but the majority of our rapes that are called in are actually consensual sex." The state lawmaker who introduced the bill immediately denounced the comments, and soon after the sheriff's absurd comments, lawmakers unanimously approved the new system and sent the measure to the governor. The bill would require medical clinics to use rape kits to collect forensic evidence after a suspected or alleged sexual assault, and then the clinics would send the evidence for DNA testing unless the victim requests otherwise, or law enforcement agencies maybe get the prosecutor's approval not to test the kits. As you may know, Lewis, rape kits contain samples of semen, saliva, or blood taken from a victim during an examination. This is then uploaded to a national database. You can check for a match that may already exist in the system. These comments are so irresponsible. We already have a huge problem with underreported and unreported rapes because of the stigma and shame associated with it. And now we have a sheriff saying most rape accusations are false, a claim that there is no evidence supporting, by the way. He's saying if you report a rape, he would assume that it's false, and then maybe he could be swayed to consider that the rape report might actually be real. I would love to get a list of the other crimes, Lewis, from Sheriff Rowland, where he by default assumes it's most likely false until he receives some kind of contradictory report.
Yeah, it's quite irresponsible, but we know that this type of thinking exists all over the country, really. We don't normally hear it from someone in his position.
According to FBI data, the false rape rate is under 2%, with 6 to 8% being unable to be determined definitively. Even if some of those indeterminates were false, which obviously they're not all false, that would bring the number at most to 1 in 10. And don't get me wrong, it is a horrible crime that needs to be actively prosecuted. Fake rape claims need to be prosecuted as crimes. That is very, very serious. Any amount of false rape is too high. But to say that 2 to 10% is most rapes are false is ludicrous. And I also want to remind you, some of those 2% that are the false rape cases, they're considered false because the accuser at some point recants or chooses not to go forward with a prosecution. A lot of those you have to consider are because the victim is just not emotionally able to go through with facing their accuser in court or being cross-examined by their accuser's defense attorney or whatever. So we also have to remember some of that 2% that we say are false rape accusations, just because a victim says, I want to take back my claim here, we know that some of those instances are because of the just horrible nature of being put up on the stand and cross-examined by someone who is going to put you in that position. That is horrible.
Yeah, that can happen. And I've said, like you said, let's take all of these accusations seriously.
Right.
And let's make sure that people know that if they make false accusations, that we really need to throw the book at them hard, Dave. Really, really hard.
Meanwhile, it's estimated 2/3 of rapes and sexual assaults aren't even reported. And we have a sheriff, right, a law enforcement official saying most rapes are false, so we don't even need mandatory rape kits. It's just stunning. And this guy certainly does not deserve to be sheriff of, doesn't deserve to be sheriff of insert whatever ridiculous podunk place you want here. In any case, let's not go further down that path because we don't want to upset anybody. I just am seeing all the comments that might come in if I were to sort of expand on that suggestion. Okay, we have a man who shot 3 people dead after complaining that they weren't speaking English and that they couldn't speak English. I'm speaking of 39-year-old Milwaukee man, Dan Pop, who has been charged with 3 counts of homicide for allegedly tracking down and shooting 3 neighbors after confronting one over the fact that he didn't speak English. I'm talking about 40-year-old Jesus Manzo Perez, 36-year-old Fia View, and 32-year-old My View, who were the 3 victims shot and killed by Mr. Pop. He first tried to lure Mr. Manzo Perez to his apartment with an offer of beer. According to police officials, Pop stopped Manzo Perez and his son as they walked by his apartment on the way to the laundry room, and after refusing the offer of beer, Pop asked where they were from. He learned that they were from Puerto Rico and replied, "Oh, that's why you don't speak English. You're Puerto Rican." Right. I mean, they're from Puerto Rico, in other words, part of the United States. And according to Manzo Perez's son, they were returning to their own apartment when they encountered Pop on the stairs again, pointing a rifle at them, saying, quote, "You guys got to go." He shot Manzo Perez in the head and then fired at, but fortunately missed, Manzo Perez's son. Then he went into the View's apartment where he kicked down the door and shot both Fia and My View as they were huddled with their 4 children. Police responded to the scene. They went up to the apartment where the children had fortunately escaped, and Pop surrendered to police after dropping his weapon when ordered to do so. No prior criminal record for Pop, Lewis. Police are saying that there was a medical emergency call at Pop's residence the day before the triple murder, but they didn't provide any other details. I can't tell whether this guy was on this shooting spree because of so-called family values or so-called Christian values, or as will likely be attributed to just mental illness.
Yeah, could be. It could be schizophrenia. How do you really know? we don't know what that medical emergency was, but I do know that this type of, all the rhetoric we've been seeing lately could definitely push someone over the edge. Maybe that's what happened here.
Oh, yeah. This is the type of behavior that is legitimized by racist, xenophobist, nativist political rhetoric. You be the judges to the audience, I say, as to where that is coming from. Is it Hillary Clinton? Is it Bernie Sanders? Are we hearing that from Marco Rubio, who left the race? Or was it coming from Ted Cruz? Or, I don't know, was it coming from the guy who all the KKK and white nationalist groups seem to be supporting? I don't know. You figure out where some of that rhetoric might be coming from, but no doubt whatsoever that rhetoric absolutely may be a factor here. And as usual, this is getting very little coverage. What's getting a ton of coverage is Donald Trump's accusations that Bernie supporters are inciting violence at his rallies, but not much coverage of this, is there?
Not really, no. I did see this story in a couple places. You would think that this would be breaking news all over the place on every outlet.
Right.
I guess not. I guess this
Louis,
isn't, somehow this isn't juicy enough.
It's a lone white guy who's just mentally ill. Yeah, I mean, he went after immigrants who he believed didn't speak English and were somehow un-American. I get that. But this is just a lone white guy. It has nothing to do with any political rhetoric. Come on. We have a voicemail number. That number is 219-2-DAVID-P. And I received this voicemail earlier.
Hey, David and Louis. This isn't really about the show. I'm just a viewer. And I thought I would call and suggest an activity if you guys had been thinking about it, which is skydiving. It's pretty amazing. I started doing it a few months ago. It's pretty awesome. So there are two types of people, the type of person who wants to go skydiving and the type of person who doesn't really want to go skydiving. So if you're the type of person who's been thinking about going skydiving, you should do it. Anyways, have a great day. Thanks for your time. Bye.
Yeah. I've never gone skydiving. I have a curiosity about skydiving, but I don't at all feel driven to do it, and I don't see myself doing it anytime soon.
I feel the same way. I've been curious about it, but I actually feel no desire to go try. I know I have friends that have done it. They love it. I'm just not in the same category.
Yeah, and I don't know what could maybe change that. I assume that as people sort of go through life and have more responsibilities and attachments and sort of interconnectedness, that they might feel, because it is not the safest activity. I know that it is relatively safe if done with the right professionals, but it is not the safest activity that you can imagine doing. You're essentially uninsurable from the point of view of many types of life insurance if you skydive or fly small planes for that matter in the 2 years prior to wanting to be insured. So actuaries have figured out this is a risky activity. I assume as people get older, they'd generally be less likely to do it until maybe you're really old, like George H.W. Bush, who has been doing it on his birthday in his 80s and beyond. And that I guess is a factor. I don't know.
I've seen many a video of someone in their 80s or older who decide they want to go skydiving.
Yeah.
And they look like they're having a great time. I'll tell you that.
On today's bonus show, police are warning residents in a Massachusetts town of rap battles. There has been a discovery of hidden rooms beyond King Tut's tomb, and we will talk about thieves being able to so quickly install credit card and debit card skimmers at ATMs and on other devices. All of these stories and more on the bonus show. And remember, get yourself a discounted membership with a free t-shirt at davidpakman.com/spring16. Only about a week left on that deal.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.